The material and information contained within the Chatting with Cumberland podcast is for general information purposes only. You should not rely upon the material or information on the website as a basis for making any business, legal, or other decisions. While we endeavor to keep the content and resources of Chatting with Cumberland current and accurate, the Cumberland Board of County Commissioners, Administration, and all departments and affiliates make no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to services, show content, and guest opinions contained on the Chatting with Cumberland for any purpose. The views and opinions expressed on the show are not representative of that of county commissioners, administration, or employees unless expressly specified. The Chatting with Cumberland podcast will be discussing sensitive topics such as suicide, sexual abuse, drug use, mental health, and domestic violence. Viewer discretion is advised. And hi, everybody. I'm Frank Carosa, and this is Chatting with Cumberland. I'd like to introduce you to a few friends.
Hi, I'm Beth Thomas.
I'm Matthew Johnson.
I'm J.O.B.
Welcome, everyone. How's everybody doing?
Fantastic.
Yeah. Did you guys have a nice weekend?
Wonderful.
The best.
Very
It was doable.
Doable. So we'd like to welcome everybody. We're so happy to be here. It's our first episode for the Chatting with Cumberland podcast, and I'm so excited to have our very first guest, J.O.B., here with us. Hey, J.O.B.
Hello.
How you doing, buddy? All right?
I'm living the dream.
Living the dream. All right, cool. So today we wanted to get started to share this special story with you. This will be part one of 2 segments that we'll be shooting, and we just want to familiarize you guys with our guests and what we have going on here with Chatting With. It's the first podcast in New Jersey of this format, and we're really excited to bring it to you. So we hope we can help by linking you all to some available resources within our community, and share a personal connection with J.O.B.'s story and help you get started taking that first step into getting help or asking for help or connecting with professionals and friends alike. So we really look forward to having you all here, and thank you so much for joining us. All right. So, J.O.B., what brings you in today, man? Why don't you tell the people what you got going on? And
Well, I was drag kicking and screaming to this, utterly coerced by these madmen I thought were my friends, so I figured at the end of the day it couldn't do any harm to just go along with it. There's no harm ever in humoring people. But jokes aside, I'm here to hopefully bring some hope to the people in need, to their families, and to tell people that they're not alone, no matter how alone they feel.
That's great. So tell me, where does your story begin? How did this all come about?
Well, like any good autobiography, my life turned to complete crap when I was a child. I was, by all accounts, a moody child, and there's really no wondering on that point. My mother and my father were both involved in a very traumatic incident that left us, the 3 of us, in a foster home. I had some very formative experiences in this foster home.
Tell us a little bit about it. You know, what's on your mind? What happened?
My foster parents were abusive. The children were out of control. The oldest child had some issues with violence. He liked to put his hands on the rest of us. I routinely remember being thrown across the room by him. The middle child, who was 13, liked to set fires, something I'm sure is a troubling sign to all the psychiatrists out there. Then were my brothers and I, who didn't do much of anything except get tossed around. In that foster home, I was sexually abused. There was an investigation and nothing came of it. It was some pretty heavy stuff to experience in childhood that left me with a lifelong history of depression. I remember being diagnosed at 9 with major depressive disorder, which might seem a little far out, but it's a good example of what can happen to a young mind that's developing.
And how do you think those experiences shaped you in your adult life?
That's very easily answered. My adult life became reckless hedonism, doing anything to escape pain. I became an alcoholic very early. I became a drug addict. I resisted authority in any attempts to change. I didn't want to get better. I wanted to get worse. I didn't care anymore. Everything and anything was a reason to escape the vast and crippling amounts of pain that had been distilled into me from a very young age. It seems almost as though that socially I was a little behind, more so than others, that I grew at a much slower pace. I made all kinds of excuses as to why my behavior was acceptable. You'd do it too if you felt like I did. I resisted any and all attempts to change, convinced that the only thing that could help me was the eventual release of death. I had a very nihilistic and pessimistic life, which I convinced myself was simply just coming to terms with the nature of reality. But the reality of that is, what your life isn't what it's going to be forever, and there are steps you can take to change that.
That's a well thought out answer. It's my understanding also in your childhood you may have been diagnosed with autism.
Actually, I was not diagnosed with autism until my mid-20s. My youngest brother, however, was diagnosed with autism right from the onset.
Tell me what that's like. What is, for lack of a better question, what does autism feel like to you? How does that personify itself, in your day-to-day?
Well, personally, I never noticed until I was diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure everyone else did. My boundaries are poor. I can be socially awkward. I'm told at times I can be charismatic and well-spoken. To somebody who just listening to me, and I get this a lot, says, "Wow, I wouldn't have noticed that you have autism," I always tell them, spend a few more minutes around me.
Now, why don't you introduce Matthew here and how you got to know Matt and how we got to know each other and how this story kind of came about.
Matthew has been a lifelong friend. I met him when I was 16 or 17. He's always been a very warm and compassionate soul, and his friendship helped shape the trajectory of my life. I met Franco around the same time. Another warm and compassionate soul. You can kind of see a trend here. Two very good guys that I can't speak highly enough of.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you being here for sure. So, kind of winding back a little bit, when you experienced a sexual abuse while going to foster care, were there any individuals at that time that you could connect with that may have shaped your trajectory? And were there any people that you could be, that were kind to you or that showed certain compassions in certain senses? Like how'd you make your way out of it?
I don't remember much from that time period except examinations by doctors and meetings with social workers. I did have one social worker who, before and after the incident, was exceptionally kind to me, and those are memories that stuck with me for the rest of my life. I was 7 years old at the time of this incident, and the social worker involved showed me a great deal of warmth, showed my brothers a great deal of warmth. And to me, and as an adult, that's something that still means the world.
So that social worker, I'm assuming, was from DCP&P, or
That's correct.
formerly known as DIFUS back then. Do you remember that social worker's name by any chance?
Happy.
Happy. Miss Happy Martin. If you're listening, Happy, that's for you. So what time, in your childhood or semi-adult life were you begin using substances?
I started at 12. I started slow, just opening the liquor cabinet and taking a few shots. And then at 14, I graduated to marijuana and pills. My drinking became much more severe. When I realized that being drunk made me feel like nothing mattered, I told myself I'd found a way to escape pain for good, that it would be something that would help me for the rest of my life. Over time, the severity of my hedonism drastically increased. I'd begun drinking every single day. taking every pill that I could find, doing extremely reckless things and doing worse things while under the influence, and rationalizing it to myself is that I needed it and other people didn't feel like I did.
And so, as that began to progress and worsen, did you do any acts maybe that you found regrettable or that began to take the shape of the next portion of your life as you began to grow a little bit older and, understand what you were going through? How did you come to that realization?
Absolutely. I've done many things that I regret. I did things that at times still cause me to have trouble to go to sleep at night. There are a lot of things that still trouble me, and I ask myself why I thought this was acceptable. It was these acts that started to give me the inkling of the realization that something had to change. But I was still so engrossed in the depth of my own pain that I refused to make any change because I told myself I'd just be able to die soon anyway and it wouldn't matter. What point is there in changing if you're going to drop dead any day? I wished, hoped, and acted on it.
What is the extent of your clinical depression? I mean, what does a bad episode look like? What does that feel like for those who may never have experienced depression or anxiety? Or
a bad episode of depression is not getting out of bed all day, just staring at the walls and thinking of what could have been, what could be, fantasizing about being somebody else somewhere far away, being somewhere where nobody knows your name, thinking of all the ways things could have gone differently, but didn't, either through weakness or the indifference of the universe.
And what do you find that seems to help you most when you're having an episode like that?
These days, it's very simple. I reflect on the things I have that others don't. I reflect on how things have gone right instead of the things that have gone wrong. I keep my focus on the things that have helped me and not the things that I've done wrong. The biggest thing is not to fall into the trap of looking at your mistakes and seeing them as inescapable. You have every chance every single day to say, today's the day that I'll do something better, something brighter for myself, for someone else. And these little acts can bring a world of mercy to yourself and to others.
And I understand during the course of your active addiction and depression, you met a woman, am I right, that you began to date. Can you tell us a little bit about her and what your experience is with her as to where it led you to where you are now?
I met my first girlfriend when I was 17. She was 10 years my senior, had some heavy-duty mental health issues. And I would find the extent of this very soon after she committed suicide. An event that scarred me for life and deepened my pain avoidance. I drank heavily, I did drugs, I did everything I could. I self-mutilated. Any pain was better than the pain I was feeling.
And what type of release did you get from self-mutilation? What does that feel like?
Physical pain is much easier to deal with than emotional pain. It sounds like a cliche, but it's true. If you can only focus on one thing at a time, then focusing on how your body hurts makes you feel better than how your heart hurts.
And what do you think that suicide had an impact on the most in your particular life? How did it affect you? How did the symptoms manifest itself into your depression?
I already had pretty sturdy abandonment issues from my time in foster care, but this left me with a lifelong fear that everybody I loved would be taken away. Something that I watched happen time and time again. Instead of seeing them as unconnected events, I saw it as a way the universe was punishing me for having been born the wrong person, for doing the wrong things. For all the things I had no control over, I saw them as an abject punishment to be taken. It made me weaker. It made me hate myself. It made me hate the world. It made me bitter. It made my depression worse. My substance abuse skyrocketed, and I did everything I could to try to make it all go away.
Was there anybody that you could confide in or speak to at that time when your first girlfriend committed suicide?
I handled it very poorly. I spoke at length to anybody who was willing to listen. Unfortunately for me, I did not understand that there are not as many people as you think would like to talk so deeply about subjects, definitely not people you just meet. But I met a lot of compassionate and good-hearted people who listened to me, and at length, for long periods of time, on the same subject over and over. 2 of them are sitting with me here today. There's always somebody you can reach out to. Just make sure you're picking the right people.
And that's one of the aims of Chatting with Cumberland, is to give folks who feel that they are voiceless or can't speak about what's happening in their life an open and anonymous forum to be able to communicate and connect with professionals. And that's the whole idea behind what we're doing. And I really appreciate you coming here and telling your story about that, and as I understand too, after experiencing that first suicide, there were times when you may have committed, attempt to commit suicide yourself. Am I right?
That's correct. I can't count the number of failed attempts I've had. My body is littered with scars from self-mutilation, fleeting memories of nights I tried to die. I was institutionalized 3 times in a psychiatric hospital. Throughout my life, there were many such attempts, and I have the great luck to be here today with a drastically different story to tell than when I started.
And tell us a little bit about that. How was your experience in the psych ward? What's that environment like?
Absolutely dehumanizing. There are movies and books on the subject. If you're familiar with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it's very, very similar. You're treated as an object in most facilities. People talk to you as if you're crazy. Being ill doesn't make you crazy. The things you go through don't make you crazy. And if somebody's telling you that you are crazy, then they're wrong. It's okay to struggle, and it's okay to suffer, and it's okay to hurt, but that doesn't make you crazy. There were some good workers in the psychiatric hospitals, but a great deal of them were burnt out and just unwilling to be empathetic or unable to be compassionate.
Do you think the disconnect between your feelings and their professionalism caused a barrier between how your emotions were manifesting themselves?
That's a very likely possibility. It's not one that I would doubt. But there is also a difference between professionalism and gaslighting a patient.
Understandably. Now, Beth, what are your thoughts on psychiatric wards and medicine and how we deal with folks that have mental illness?
Well, actually, I'm sorry. I was so involved in the story. I was letting you ask all the questions.
Sure.
I didn't. I wanted to ask you if all during that time, from when you were in foster care all the way up till you were 17, were you involved in any therapies? Did anybody try to encourage you to go to a doctor? Were you on any medicines? And maybe, you didn't take it, or I'm not sure. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. I had been on a gamut of medication since I was 7 years old. I'd been on everything from antidepressants to mood stabilizers and antipsychotics, sleep aids, anxiety medications. The therapy I had wasn't effective, but I didn't keep trying either. I ran through 3 or 4 therapists, and eventually that turned to drug-seeking behaviors as well in my late adolescence. So there was also the disconnect between the help I was receiving and how I would not let myself receive help.
So to answer your question, I think that there's a place for everything depending on what people need, but I like preventative first, and that's why I was asking you, what had you gone through before you got to that point?
I was in therapy immediately after the events at foster care, because I had been acting out in school, I got myself kicked out of school. I got bounced from 2 different schools before I was sent to a school for the behaviorally challenged.
And you were attending school at various points while homeless as well.
That's correct. I was first removed from my home when I was 14. It went unnoticed because at the time I'd been kicked out of another school. So I was able to skate along pretty happily, but my later adolescence was a little more difficult in that respect.
And in your journey, I understand that there was a period of time where you became incarcerated.
That's correct. I had a violent offense for which I served some time in jail for. It wasn't pretty, and I'm not proud of any of it. And it's one of the many things I wish I could take back.
And as a result of that, I understand, was it before or after your incarceration that you met your second girlfriend?
It was before, actually. The second one and I got along like gasoline and fire. When we worked, it was great. Things were great. And when it didn't, things were explosive. We were passionately in love, and passion also swung both ways. It was an unhealthy, toxic relationship. It was defined by codependency, yet neither of us could let us go. It's something that would set the stage for a great deal of pain for the both of us. Our illness was so profound, we didn't see the harm we were doing to each other and for each other.
So you both were in active addiction, using during the course of your relationship, and there was one night when things came to a head. All right, tell us a little bit about it.
That's correct. I was invited over while my ex was intoxicated, and there was an altercation. She and I had conceived a child together, and this altercation cost us the custody of our child.
Tell us a little bit about it. What happened that night?
That night, I was attacked. I remember very little except waking up in the ambulance to somebody cutting off my clothes, the profound bleeding, and being questioned by a police officer while I was hooked up to an IV.
So after that incident, what became of it? What, you were going to the hospital, and what happened?
When I woke up in the hospital the next morning, a worker from DCP&P had told me that my son was now in custody of the state. So immediately, I waived my right for treatment. I refused treatment. And I got myself out of the hospital immediately to make as many calls as I could. I found there would be a social worker attending the case, and that it was time to take a serious look at myself if I wanted to support my son.
Would you say that was your first wake-up call? That was
my biggest wake-up call. That was the single event that had put such a cold fear in my heart that if I didn't shape up immediately, that a child who needed me would suffer for it. My childhood wasn't very pretty, and I told myself from even before my child was born, I would never let him live the life I did. It was time to own up to my mistakes, accept where I had failed, and make a better future.
And what was your first step in that, J.O.B.? What did you do, when you were visited by DCP&P? Did they help counsel you into what steps you would take, or did you just kind of start calling whoever you could? How did that happen?
I was told I would need to go to a substance abuse clinic, and that's the very first thing I did. I knew I had a problem, and I knew the ways I was living just weren't compatible with raising a child. So immediately, I got myself involved with a rehab, and rehab did wonders for me. The people I met were compassionate, they were caring. They saw me not just as an object, but as somebody in need. They listened to me rant for long periods of time about how I was feeling and how I didn't think anything was worth doing and how I'd missed my son, and they just listened. Sometimes that's the most important thing you can do. And little by little, I got myself in line. I got myself sober. I got into therapy, which was another big step for me. And from there, I would see every little success along the way shape up to become a greater success.
And so I understand you had a small custody battle with consideration to what happened with the former girlfriend that you had. And can you tell us a little bit about your experience? Like, what does that feel like for somebody that may be going through it, and what kind of gave you hope to keep strong and keep persevering through all of that?
It was agonizing and anxiety-inducing. I was terrified at any moment I could lose my child. I had done my best. I had hoped. I had prayed. I struggled to make myself a better person in the best interest of my son, but I still feared that at the end of the day I would lose him. Luckily, my anxiety was for absolutely nothing. We ended up with a joint custody agreement that later over time became my having full custody of my child. What should give you hope in this is, if you're doing the right things, making the right moves, being a person who is capable of parenting effectively, then in the end, it'll all work out for you. It's scary. It's absolutely terrifying. But the big impetus is on you to make the right choices. And as long as you continue to live honestly, make the right choices, succeed for not just yourself, but for your child, you'll make it every time.
And when the custody battle had finally ended and you were clean and sober, what next steps did you start taking to kind of further your mission and, your resolve in life?
During the case of the custody battle, I enrolled myself in therapy. The therapy also was utilizing a recently legalized experimental type of therapy, which is the use of ketamine for the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, something I'd been diagnosed with many years ago. The therapy itself did a great deal of help for me. It helped me get myself stable. The biggest part in my custody battle wasn't just getting sober, it was becoming stable. And therapy and medication were the biggest components of getting myself together. Because even if you're sober, you still have all the issues that made you used to begin with. In order to really treat addiction, I feel as though you have to treat the underlying issues of addiction. That may not be true for everybody. Addiction is a very complicated thing, but in my case, therapy is what really pushed me forward and helped me to become a better person.
And when you talk about ketamine treatment, what does that look like? What's kind of involved in that for people who may not have heard of it, or for folks that may be going through it, or folks that wonder about it?
It's a new type of therapy in which you are hooked to an IV with ketamine, a dissociative drug. It's been legalized for the experimental use by psychiatrists across the country. What this does is kind of just removes you from being so close to the trauma so that you can work with a trauma therapist who specializes in treating people with these conditions. And you go over all these aspects and all throughout your life, and you find ways to make it easier, ways to cope, ways to come out and look in the mirror and say, today I like myself. Something I hadn't said for a very, very long time.
Congratulations, man. That's it's pretty intense. And it seems like you're doing well for yourself now, and every day seems to be getting a little bit better. Do you still feel any type of anxiety, about certain things? I mean, does the ketamine remove you from that anxiety, or is this something you still have to go through and get through with therapy?
It removes you from the anxiety and from the depression while you are attending, and it works for the depression and for the anxiety for a long time. But no medication or therapy in the world can take away everything. Instead, it's to teach you how to cope with it, so things that might have seemed world-ending before are now very bearable. It teaches you ways to cope, ways to get through situations that would have seemed incredible. It teaches you to deal with the despondency, so you're no longer despondent. You can say, I accept this. Things are going to be okay.
And how did you get introduced to this new therapy? How did that happen? How did you get referred? Or
It's actually a very chance meeting. I had a girlfriend who also died. This would be the second one. Her death was a drug overdose. I went to my general doctor in order to comply with the criteria for insurance, which said I needed a checkup. The doctor checked out my blood pressure, my mental health status, and he made a recommendation for me to see the specialist. And that recommendation changed the trajectory of my life completely.
wow. So, Beth, let me ask you. Hearing bits and pieces of Rizzo's story now, what comes to mind as a person who deals with helping families and youth that have intellectual disabilities? What do you immediately think of coming to mind where there could have been interventions in Rosario's story that he may not have had otherwise? Where do you think that the system and the children's system of care could have intervened, or where they did a good job in helping him kind of get through some of the issues that we're discussing today?
Well, if I'm hearing accurately, your DCP social worker helped you. I'm a little bit, not a little bit, I'm a lot upset that they didn't pick up your autism when you were younger. I think that played a big part in some of those behaviors as well as your experience, in your foster home. To me, getting the right people, the right evaluations done makes a big difference for a child, because then they can get the right services in school. And maybe it wouldn't have been one more thing that you had to deal with. To me, the school social workers, the school child study teams, they're sometimes the first line of defense for a child, because they're with them in the schools. And I'm not sure your experience with that. Did you encounter the child study teams at all when you went to those behavioral schools and things like that?
I did. In the school, I saw a therapist. I saw the child study team. I sat in on multiple meetings. It was never once brought up that I may have high-functioning autism.
Do you think that there's been advancements since that time? We're going back a number of years. How many years are we talking?
It's been quite a while. I'd say it had been 16 years.
About 16 years. I think a lot has changed in that time, in my personal experience. But, where do you think that there could have been other interventions?
Well, I was just thinking when you brought up the PerformCare and kayak and those therapists coming into the home, helping out, those are some of the places that I would be recommending if someone had called me had a similar story. Have you tried this? Did you call PerformCare? Did you ask for mobile response? Do you have in-home therapy? A lot of your scenario, though, you weren't stable with your housing. It sounds like you were kind of going from, was it home to home? I was going to ask you that because you said you were homeless, but you didn't really say where you were staying. Was it couch surfing? Were you in a car? Like a shelter?
I bounced from place to place, and that's a history I would continue well into my adulthood. I only once went to a shelter, and that was for the grand period of one night in Philadelphia. I found it to be so unbearably unpleasant that I resumed my general activity of camping and couch surfing, and then moving back in and out with my parents.
So it sounds to me like you were pretty resilient. You didn't even notice your strengths then.
I sure didn't. I'm still surprised when people tell me I'm strong.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for the folks listening that may not know what PerformCare is, what is it? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So PerformCare is an agency that the state hired to provide services to children up to age 21. And it can be behavioral supports. It can be services for families that have children with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And it also has a substance use component for adolescents.
And that's what we do, Beth, essentially. The sponsors and beginnings of this show, Chatting with Cumberland, came from the kayak, otherwise known as the Children's Interagency Coordinating Council. And it's a group of professionals that meet on a monthly and semi-regular basis to discuss and help plan and shape policy to help people that may be in a similar situation. So with we'll have to cut that out, obviously. Sorry. So it's designed to help folks that may be experiencing certain issues, whether it be, mental health issues, whether it be behavioral issues, as you said earlier, Beth. Some of those issues can start getting treatment at the very first step, and we're going to list the phone numbers for you to call to contact somebody if you are in need. And of course, we'll we'll list our contacts for any personal emails or any requests for assistance for you to be able to utilize and use. And that's what Chatting With is all about. And so, J.O.B., as we kind of go on through the story here, you've received some great help from a few social workers from Department of Children and Families and DCPMP. And you received a lot of love and understanding from the folks at the rehab that helped you get clean. The courts ultimately sided with you after a long custody battle for you to keep possession of your son. And you're here now. What do the later stages look like now? What do you currently have going on that you're excited about?
Well, right now, after a long period of fighting for custody, I was awarded full custody of my child, which was a very big surprise and shock to me, because I didn't really give myself credit for all the changes I'd been making. And it all occurred at once at that point, and I realized I finally moved forward. After 10 long years of having been a dropout, I got my GED. And from there, I went on to study for a career in the medical field, something that I'm quickly approaching to finishing. I'm going to become a licensed medical worker soon, and it's something I'm very excited about. I'll be able to be out there helping people, maybe some people who needed somebody like I needed them. Maybe I can do the things I can to make this world a little brighter place, and more importantly, provide a happier and stable home for my son than I had.
That's fantastic, man. Congratulations. I'm so excited for you to be able to make a turnaround like that. That's really exceptional, and a big part of the reason why we wanted to tell your story, because your story is unlike any I've ever heard, in the sense of where it ticks every single box that we deal with as the kayak, as the Children's Interagency Coordinating Council. We discuss a lot of these things, and a lot of times we come across families that are dealing with one or two issues that need help, typically intellectual disabilities or developmental delays. Substance abuse is obviously a big one. As a professional in the field, and Beth, maybe you can chime in on this, is in my short 3 years here as a freshman, I've noticed a lot of advancements, especially in the field of substance use. Years ago they would call it substance abuse. Now they're kind of taking a more kind approach into dealing with folks who have a disease. It's not a mental state as much as it is a disorder that's very difficult to control and very complex in a lot of cases that deal with underlying trauma and issues, as you said. What do you think? Do you think the climate has changed with services being rendered to folks that have, clinical depression, anxiety, and/or substance, use disorders?
I know that there's a lot of campaigning to try to take the stigma away of mental health. I think services have been there, and people didn't always reach out because of the stigma that they felt. And I think that there are more resources being provided to try to help with that. So yes, I do think that we're trying to get more therapists, and we're trying to get more psychiatrists and other specialists in our area. One of the big things I did want to mention, when you were talking about your experience as a 7-year-old in the foster home, that they now, actually pretty close to us, have the center, the Child Advocacy Center. And that's where they have therapists and lawyers and the prosecutors coming together to help children who have experienced something that they never should have experienced, to help them get through the process and to at an early age, try to work through that, to get the help that a lot of children maybe didn't get in the past. So I'm hoping that that's a positive thing for the youth of Cumberland County.
Sure. And there's supportive services to help guide their parents through helping them
Yes.
through the issue.
I believe the Center for Family
more of a
Services.
wraparound approach where we're dealing with the whole family, not only the client that needs the services, but their family as well, to help build and maintain a supportive structure for them to overcome the issues that they're facing.
Correct. And in the past, DCP also would kind of be charged solely with the child abuse. Something happened, you take the child out of the home pretty much immediately. Now they are working more with the families. What caused the families to be in the situation that they're in? How can we support them before we just remove a child and put them in a foster home? So there are a lot of pluses, a lot of positive things going on. I don't think we are where we should be, but it's changed over the years to be more family friendly, more child friendly.
Sure. And I think one of the cunning things about addiction is oftentimes a person suffering from it has a blind side where it's very difficult for them to assess their actions, to take responsibility for certain actions, because of the mind state that the drugs leave them in. And one of the reasons why, in addition to providing some support for telling your story, I brought Matthew Johnson here. And Matt, I wanted to get your opinion. You've known to kind of get your perspective on how you met him and the changes that you've personally seen outside of his story that he's had over the time.
Sure, and I appreciate you having me out here to share my perspective on his story. I've known J.O.B. for a very long time. I've known J.O.B. for a very long time, as we've discussed. Met him when he was a teenager, and he was a pretty radical kid. And he had a wicked sense of humor, which is why I got to know him. We actually met on Facebook, but happened to live right down the street, and we were hanging out, and back in the day, partying and just having a good time, and going to me and my friends going to metal concerts and all the things that we used to do. But as I grew up, became an adult, and started to live out my life, I noticed something in him that there was a certain spark of humanity in there that despite his instability, there was definitely a potential there. So I kind of mentored him a little bit and tried to give him some guidance when he faced these difficulties as best as I could. I got only a limited glimpse of what he was going through for what he would tell me. But what I witnessed over the years was a gradual transformation from a very reactive and angry and upset young man into a stable, calm, decisive, and really all around good guy and a father who is making the right decisions. And it wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a very gradual process where he just started making better decisions over time, and started shifting towards doing the right things. And the biggest change happened once he started the ketamine therapy. Mm-hmm. That for sure was the big change, because that was kind of re-guided his whole thought process from what I could see. And in addition to that, becoming a father and deciding to take responsibility for his son, and watching him dedicate everything he's doing for his son. It was just an incredible experience to see him do that. I remember at one point, him and his ex-girlfriend were homeless, and they came to me to just try to get some basic assistance and with food and things like that. And there was definitely drug addiction going on and issues like that. But even throughout all these times where a lot of poor decisions were made, I could still see that deep down that he wanted to do the right things. He wasn't always able to, but as he progressed and grew up and started making the right decisions, you could see this transformation that happened over time.
All right. And go ahead, Beth.
I'd like to know more about you as a parent. You said that you have autism, and I know a lot of my families would be very interested to hear how parenting is for you.
Well, I imagine it's pretty fun to watch me play with my son in public because I get pretty goofy with him. He and I are very close, and I act ridiculously with him because it makes him laugh, and that's pretty much my favorite thing in this world. I love my son very dearly. We do everything together, and I try to do as much as I can to make him happy. Besides looking pretty awkward in public, which is something I'm used to, I'm not really sure what else. I just have a very deep connection with my son, and I like to make him laugh.
So how do you have any supports in helping you to parent your son, or are you doing it on your own?
Well, his grandparents are definitely involved. They love my boy to death, and they can be a big help. The maternal grandparents also like to visit every once in a while and come see how he's doing. But there's always been people to help, and it's been a big help just to get through the task of being a single parent.
Did you find it hard to get attached or to show that love in the beginning, given not just autism, but your history?
No, for me it was a very instantaneous thing. In fact, I remember when my ex and I went for the ultrasound to determine the baby's gender, I went outside and I jumped in the air and I screamed, yes! I was instantly attached. Every second of the day I was asking my ex how the baby was doing. How was the baby doing? Are you okay? Is he okay? I loved that child even before he was born. It only deepened after.
That's wonderful. And then I wanted to go back because I think there would be people who might be interested. After your incarceration, did you find it hard to reacclimate to society, or were you not in as long as I'm picturing in my head?
It's a bit of both. It took some time, and when I walked down the street, I would look down and be surprised that there weren't cuffs on me. It was just a very unpleasant thing because I felt almost as I had been marked, that I was now a bad person and that this was a stain on my soul I'd never get rid of.
And did you get supports when you got out of jail to help you?
My family did their best to help me come to terms with everything, but that's about it.
Okay. And was it jail or was it prison?
Jail.
Jail. Okay. Because I was thinking there are a lot of reentry programs now, too, to help individuals come out. But I'm not sure if it's jail or prison. We'd have to look into that.
There, each county, each of the 21 counties in New Jersey has what are called youth services commissions, and they're a group of individuals and professionals alike, community members, that also meet very similarly to the kayak. They meet on a monthly basis, typically 10 to 12 times a year. And there's grant money from the Juvenile Justice Commission allotted to each county, depending upon their needs and demonstrated needs, that assist in funding programs to help those coming home from prison, juveniles, those that are going into prison or are currently actively incarcerated. There's diversion programs that help them keep them out of the system if the offense is small enough to where it doesn't formally need to be adjudicated by a judge. And of course, we have prevention programs that run in schools and programs to assist those that are on probation. And not a lot of people know that. And this is one of the missions of Chatting with Cumberland, is bringing the knowledge of these systems that are currently in place that are really incredible. I mean, if I had known as a young adult and as a professional going to school to get my law and justice degree from Rowan University, if I had known that all the people that are central to the work that we do convene in one place once a month that's open and public to anyone who would like to attend or has to have vested interest or would like to speak their voice, I probably would have been attending much sooner. These are the folks that shape policy. These are the folks that fund programming and that determine what the needs of the community are. And the more that we connect with our community in platforms like this one and others that we have, the better gauge that we will have for stories like, JOBs, or for stories of youth that may have grown up with single parents or no parents or guardianship or foster care or homelessness. I mean, there's a lot of professionals that are active. I think that where we might be missing the mark a little bit is engaging with those folks in new and innovative ways. And that kind of circles us back to why you're here. We certainly appreciate you telling the story. What advice would you have for somebody that might be going through similar, even just one or more of those issues that we've covered? What do you think helped you the most along your mission?
I think that's a pretty clear answer. Reach out. Reach out to anyone and everyone. If there's somebody you can trust, somebody you can have listen to you, reach out to them. And there's at least one person. For me, there were a couple. There are people who care about you. There are people who love you, who want to see you succeed, who see the goodness in you despite what you may have done or how you perceive yourself. You can reach out to them. You can find therapists. You can find doctors. There's nothing wrong with going through something. It doesn't make you crazy. It doesn't make you wrong. There are people out there whose whole purpose is to help you become a better you. And you can do that just by reaching out. Talk to a friend. Talk to a professional. All of these things can help you get out of what is an unbearable and oppressive darkness.
And we hope to help that mission along with having the live Q&A session that we have planned with JOB. I'm sorry. We plan to have a live Q&A session where you can log in and join our platform. We currently have a Discord server that's open and anonymous. We'll be broadcasting via YouTube Live, where you can come and join us for that session after we chop up JOB's story into two parts so you can familiarize yourself with what he's been dealing with, and we'll isolate some of those issues. And if you're dealing with them, you can reach out. There'll be professionals here. You can chat with friends. You can chat with just about anybody who would like to hear your story. And we hope that you'll reach out to us regarding the issues that you might be having, and reach out for help for linkages to those services that would be able to help you. As Beth, you mentioned earlier, what are some of the areas that PerformCare covers?
So they cover the behavioral supports for children. They cover family supports for children with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which could include respite care, help with camps. They can help with some home modifications, maybe car modifications, and some other assistive technology, not including computers. Sorry, everybody. And they do help with substance abuse.
And with some of the issues regarding the pandemic, how accessible are these services to folks who may need them? Do they do any type of electronic or teletherapy, teleconferencing? What are behavioral supports? What exactly does that mean to somebody who may need them?
So they were open during the whole pandemic, but through telehealth. I believe that they did not have office hours open, but I didn't ask them because most of my families already had support set up in the home. And they did the telehealth, the remote assistance, until they get approvals to go back into the home. To be honest with you, I haven't checked to see if they were doing that. I do know the summer camps opened again, and anyone who had signed up for that prior to May 30th and were approved, I'm assuming that they're able to get their camps. If they're not, let us know. And then as for substance use treatment, that I don't know the answer to.
And as a professional, do you regularly get communications from those in the public that may be asking for assistance?
All the time.
All the time. So you're
families
busy.
Always reaching out. Families asking for those behavioral supports that might be a secondary effect of a diagnosis. Families in general who just really see something, know something is needed and not sure what it is, and then we refer to the PerformCare, well, actually mobile response PerformCare system, depending on what it is.
And I did want to say to those of you out there regarding the substance use issues, if you yourself are suffering with substance abuse issues or know somebody who is, currently in Cumberland County, we offer services at the First Step Clinic and ROW, which is Recovery on Wheels, on our website, njacysca.org. We offer all the locations of where our Recovery on Wheels events are going to be. If you bring somebody that you know or yourself are suffering from substance use issues, you can meet a licensed nurse and clinicians that will get you into treatment right away. Additionally, we offer referral services for juveniles that may need recovery supports and detoxes for substance abuse withdrawal. There are funding pots available for those that may need it. All we need to do is get in contact with you and we can get you set up right away. And these are services that can happen just that fast. So if you know somebody, please reach out to us and we'll gladly sort them out and get them help and refer to the right person that they need to see.
Frank, I do want to put a plug out for the school system too, because if you can get to the guidance counselors or if you can get to the child study team, they are very knowledgeable about resources. And even for those families that maybe have some disagreements with their team, they're all still a team together, the parents and the child study team. And I have seen many families receive resources that they need by going through the system of special education, going through that process. So hopefully that's a help.
And if someone needs direct help, they can get in contact with you. We'll list the information, right?
Oh, absolutely.
On that
I'd be glad
end,
to help.
because we know that some of the schools are closed right now. I mean, for summer, and of course the pandemic of what's happening right now. So I'm sure there's been some pivoting on that you're well versed in, and we can certainly. You're only one step away from help, and that's the only way that I can really put it to really make it resonate.
And one thing parents need to know too, or not just parents, but people in general, is as you said, reach out, because I don't know all the answers, but when people reach out, they're not alone. So now there's two of us looking into resources,
right.
Or it could be three as we start calling. That's the nice thing about being in a small community, is we do know a lot of each other, and hey, I don't know the answer, but I know Frank will, or I know Jacoby will. So.
Right. A lot of professionals are interested, invested in helping other professionals and helping the community at large, and that's what we're all about here. And I mean, in closing, I'll ask you the $1 million question, J.O.B. If you could give a person that may be hearing your story one piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't give up. Every single moment you're breathing is a choice you can make to make today and tomorrow a better day. For me, all of the sweeping positive changes that made my life the much more livable and bearable thing that it is today is because I made one step at a time the right choice. One step at a time, I got help. One step at a time, I chose to do the right thing and not just what felt pleasurable for the moment. Every single step shapes something big. And whether it's positive or is negative depends completely on the steps you're taking. Don't give up. I haven't just had a second chance. I've had a third chance, a fourth chance, a fifth chance, a sixth chance. It took me a long time, but as long as you never give up, you'll get it too. Reach out, but most importantly, never give up.
Thank you so much, J.O.B. Matthew, thank you so much for being here today. Beth, my lovely co-host, thank you so much for believing in this project. We hope to get in touch with you all soon. We'll meet back with you for our first live Q&A session with J.O.B., where you'll be able to reach out after hearing his story and ask him questions, or ask us questions, or ask any of the professionals questions. We look forward. Please, in the meantime, please subscribe to our Instagram, which is Chatting with Cumberland, and Facebook, which is the same moniker, and our YouTube channel, which is going to be featuring this episode the first and second episodes of our first season, the Keeping It Real sessions. That'll be on YouTube, the Chatting with Cumberland podcast. So please subscribe to that channel if you like our content. And we really hope to continue bringing you what you'd like to see, because Chatting with Cumberland is for the people and by the people. Also, I'd like to send a very special thank you to our Cumberland County freeholders who have been in support of this project and engaging our community, the Department of Human Services, and also the Children's Interagency Coordinating Council, who also believed in the project enough to make it happen. We thank you all very much. And J.O.B., thank you so much for joining us, my brother. I wish you the best in your endeavors, and thank you so much for coming on and telling your story, man.
Thank you for having me. I hope this has helped somebody who needed it.
It was a real pleasure. We'll be able to tell, right? So please leave your comments and your feedback. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.